Welcome to City Skylines, the Dev Diaries. These videos take a closer look at the official Dev Diaries that can be found at the Paradox Interactive Forum, and I'll include a link to them in the video description. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the simulation. Now, I've been looking forward to reviewing this diary because I've wanted to take this opportunity to show just how different this game is from SimCity 2013. When it comes to city building games, my mantra has always been, well, how does it work in the real world? And I'm pleased to say that Colossal Order, the developers of City Skylines, seem to have the same philosophy. The latest SimCity featured a simulation that was so distanced from reality as to be verging on the ridiculous. People having no fixed home, just grabbing the first available building that they came across when they left work. Kids and students that never grew up, buses and trains that moved around completely at random with no concept of routes, and a completely crazy education system. And don't get me started about the tech-educated worker mechanism for industry. City Skylines, on the other hand, is all about the real-world simulation. Skylines features a full life cycle for its citizens. They're born, age and eventually die. Citizens have a fixed home that they travel to and from every day. Buses and trains follow fixed routes that you create and control. Students have to go to elementary school before they can progress to high school, and have to graduate high school before they can go to college. And when students finish their education, at whatever level, they go find a job that reflects their level of education and become part of the workforce. Before we jump into the real details, I want to say a quick word about agents versus statistical modelling. Right now, we're in the middle of a paradigm shift in city building games. We're moving away from the statistical modelling of games like SimCity 4, which arguably set the benchmark for that paradigm, to agent modelling, where the game creates and manages every citizen and every vehicle in your city. Now in SimCity 4, the roads only gave you a visual representation of traffic density at any particular location. They weren't real. Cars didn't have real destinations. In the new paradigm, each and every vehicle and person is a real simulated entity heading to some real destination. And every one of those entities takes up processing power. And that's why in the latest games we don't see the huge maps and the huge populations that we became used to in games like SimCity 4. But where SimCity 2013 opted to give us fudged population numbers, City Skylines have opted for real numbers. And while the city populations in City Skylines may not reach the multi-millions that we might find in a real-world metropolis, we'll certainly be getting into the hundreds of thousands. But this does mean some compromises. So for example, some residential buildings have quite a low amount of people living in them compared to the size of the building. But every one of those people is fully simulated with a home, a job and a logical pattern of moving around the city. Every citizen has a name, which by the way you can change, an age, a home and either a workplace or a school to attend. Unless, of course, they're senior citizens or preschool children, which is a category technically known as slackers. And citizens keep the same job at the same workplace, not charging around looking for a random place to work every day. And when it comes to how they get to work, or go shopping, or get to school, or wherever it is they're going, the simulation once again attempts to reflect the real world. For example, not all citizens have cars, and those that don't have cars will either walk or use public transport if it's available. And even people with cars will figure out if their journey would typically be faster by car or by public transport and change their travel habits accordingly. And let's talk about cars for a second. One big criticism of the SimCity 2013 simulation was that cars always took the shortest route, regardless of traffic conditions, which is obviously not how things work in the real world. People are a little bit smarter than that. Okay, not much, but they are a bit. So in City Skylines, drivers actually choose their route so that they avoid the busiest traffic, and they take into consideration things like the faster speed limits on major roads and highways. And as city builders, if we do run into traffic problems, we actually have a realistic set of tools that we can use to solve our problems. Roundabouts, one-way streets, elevated roads. In fact, everywhere you look in City Skylines, you see reflections of the real world. The ability to create districts with varying tax rates and local policies, which incidentally we'll be looking at more closely in the next video. Roadside parking, industrial shipping, import-export, public services, public transport, water dynamics, noise pollution, and the list goes on and on. Now, there are a few things where the simulation does take a little detour away from reality. For example, it appears that commercial buildings don't create any jobs, their only role being the sale of goods created by industry. And emergency vehicles don't get automatic right of way, they have to fight their way through the traffic like everyone else. But these little detours seem to be few and far between, and I think on balance we'll be forgiving them, just because of how much the devs have got right. Guys, this is a good simulation. And that's it for this episode. I'd like to thank Carolina for putting together the original Dev Diary. I'd like to thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this vid, hit the like button, or better still, leave me a comment. And I'll be back for episode 8, where we'll be looking at districts and policies.